Today, we're going to check out Transformers Headmasters, issues number 1 through 4. We're going straight through, no breaks, no resets. Let's go. So the first thing we see is this caption describing Cybertron at this time of war and letting us know that even when they make strides towards peace, it's kind of one step forward, two steps back. And on the page, you see Scorponok and some of his Decepticons marching some captured Autobots towards the smelting pool, i.e. towards their doom. That is, until they are ambushed by Fortress Maximus and a bunch of Autobots who've come to fight back. And the battle was pretty decisive, with Scorponok not wanting to back down, but knowing it does no good to lose more Decepticons in the battle. And back at their secret hideout, the Autobots are ready to celebrate, all except for one, Fortress Maximus. But while two well-known Autobots, Cup and Hot Rod, try to convince Fortress Maximus that this victory is a good thing, Fortress Maximus is tired of this cycle that I mentioned earlier, of always being at war and never seeing an end in sight. So what is his solution? Simple. Leave Cybertron. Take any Autobots that desire peace and are tired of war to this planet that he's been researching called Nebulous. And although Fortress Maximus, as we saw before, can fight, he desires peace and tranquility for Autobots at all cost, and after some back and forth, his Autobot brethren, including the Technobots, agreed to go along with the plan to go to Nebulous and find peace. And once they land, Fortress Maximus sends the Autobot Highbrow with a message to the inhabitants of the planet, letting them know that they come in peace and that's what they desire in coming to their planet. But this comes with all the misunderstandings that you would think would happen when a giant robot shows up to your planet. Meanwhile, in Karaja, the capital of Nebulous, the Council of Peers have heard about these robots landing, and they have gathered to figure out what to do with them. You see, Nebulous has been at peace for 10,000 years, and they even hid their weapons of destruction away. But Lord Zarek thinks that it's time to find those weapons, take them out, and defend themselves against what he says are invaders. But one of the council members, Galen, who's also in charge of those hidden weapons, disagrees. And after some back and forth, Lord Zarek comes around on the idea of peace. Or at least we think. Because as Blur shows up as this envoy for the Autobots, Zarek launches a plan to force Blur to take action that looks aggressive. This is when Zarek gets to kick off the fight that he wants by sending his personal militia to try and take out Blur. Of course, this doesn't sit well with some of the Autobots. Fortress Maximus still wants to try and make peace, but other Autobots want to defend themselves. Meanwhile, Galen finally comes around to the idea that they should take out their weapons and get ready for war. And it's a battle we get, with Cup being highlighted because Cup is not trying to talk peace in the middle of this fight. But Fortress Maximus is insistent on finding a way to make peace on this planet. How are they going to make peace on this planet? They have to gain trust with the Nebulans. So Fortress Maximus and his Autobots show up to their battle station and make a desperate offer to try and show the Nebulans that they do want peace. The Autobots offer the Nebulans their heads. And despite Lord Zarek's pushback, Galen does accept this as a peace offering. But let's just say the agreement on the peace treaty was not unanimous, as you can see in the background. Not defeated, but surely frustrated, Galen needed to go and regroup with the Autobots and figure out what they needed to do. Also, his girlfriend Lyra is Lord Zarek's daughter. That's going to be interesting later. We do get sort of an answer as to what the Nebulans were going to do with the heads of the Autobots as Galen comes to see Fortress Maximus. The Autobots offered them 5 heads, including that of Fortress Maximus, and offered for their bodies to be deactivated as a sign of good faith in this quest for peace. But Galen has come to let Fortress Maximus know that peace is getting rocky. The interesting thing we see here is that Fortress Maximus believes in peace so much that he is willing to give himself up and sacrifice himself in order to keep the peace between the Nebulans and the Autobots. But Galen doesn't think this is the way either. And this is also when Laura Zarek, who is pretending to go along with this peaceful partnership, starts to show us, the reader, his hand. We find out that the Autobots have a means of communicating with Cybertron, but they are only using it to listen. They know if they actually communicate with Cybertron themselves, the Decepticons could intercept and find out where they are. Guess what Lord Zarek is going to do? You guessed it, Lord Zarek, in his infinite wisdom, contacted Decepticons behind the Autobots' back to get the Decepticons to rid the planet of the Autobots. And of course, Scorponok is going to oblige and rid the planet of the Autobots. And then take the planet for himself. He's a Decepticon. And a couple of days later, the Decepticons show up to Nebulous and lead this all-out assault that isn't just going to harm the Autobots. This is when Gallon comes up with a master plan. He plans to merge human thought and instincts with Autobot technology as a way of gaining the advantage over the Decepticons and fighting back. Before we go too far, I'll tell you, Lyra doesn't like it. Either way, they start the process of merging these 5 volunteers with a transformable version of the heads of the 5 Autobots, including Fortress Maximus. And we get Chrome Dome, Hardhead, Highbrow, Brainstorm, and Fortress Maximus officially as the Headmasters. And as these 5 hit the battlefield, they take Scorponok by surprise, and it works out just like they thought. They end up being stronger, more agile, and more capable than their Decepticon counterparts. As again, the Autobots win the day, and the Decepticons retreat. This is also when the mix of Nebulan and Autobot is revealed to the population. And sure, a lot of people are happy, as they should be. The one person who is unhappy, Lyra, as she tells Gallon the fight against the Decepticons is the only victory he has that day. Do not forget who her father is. This is not going to work out well. We open up the book with the Terracons attacking the resort city of Splendora on Nebula. If you remember issue number 2, we ended with the Autobot Headmasters getting a win over the Decepticons, making them retreat, but they don't stay quiet for long. And after they are descended upon by the Technobots, the Terracons decide to form Abominus. Then we get some good old-fashioned combiner action when the Technobots form Computron and basically call Abominus stupid because he says Abominus is too dumb to feel what's being done to him. And after being beaten quickly and soundly, the Terracons make a quick retreat. But all this leads to another meeting of man and machine, where we find out that trust still isn't being built like you would think between the Nebulans and the Autobots. And we found out in the most real-life update to this story, the politicians of Nebulous now want to be part of what happens between the Autobots and Decepticons to make sure everything's on the up and up to and including actually being on or near the battlefield. Politicians, am I right? Also, we have Lord Zarek being locked up by Scorponok, but between Zarek's craftiness and Scorponok's inability to get a win, some ideas, some chicanery comes about between the two villainous figures. And what's on this page? Oh, nothing. Just Nebulans working on Autobot weapons. I wonder what that could lead to. Anyway, fast forward a little bit and we get Zarek reporting back to the Nebulans that he is in trouble and gives them his location so that the Autobots can come and rescue him. But when the Autobot Headmasters show up, they see a bunch of Decepticon bodies with no heads, and the Autobots even wonder what is going on, as if they couldn't guess. Zarek and a few less than honorable Nebulans help the Decepticons also become Headmasters, and the fight begins. Decepticon and Autobot Headmasters going back and forth, but notice who is in this little hovercraft above the fight. Yep, the politicians. And yes, what you thought might happen does happen as the hovercraft gets shot down. And that's when the Decepticons use this weapon they came up with, which essentially puts the Nebulans in bubbles and will have them float off into the atmosphere. One problem: Lyra, Gallon's ex-girlfriend and Zarek's daughter, is in one of the bubbles, and Zarek is the head of Scorponok. But despite Zarek being in there, Scorponok knows that this is the time to take advantage, so he lets Lyra be in one of the bubbles that may go into the atmosphere before the Autobots intervene and get them down safely. But while the Autobots are rescuing Nebulans, the Decepticons take advantage and basically shoot everyone in the back. And that is round 3 for the Decepticons. When we open up the book, we get a familiar scene with the Decepticons destroying another beautiful place on Nebula while fighting the Autobots. Of course, with the Decepticons now having their own Headmasters, along with the Autobot Headmasters being out of commission, the Decepticons have a distinct advantage, and it's time for the Autobots to retreat, at least for the ones left standing. And with his partnership with the Decepticons working out as well as he could hope, Zarak broadcasts his propaganda to the rest of Nebula. Back at the Autobot camp, they are getting word of the Decepticons' victory that day. And you guys know how I love Cup. And I love that Cup just wants to go back out there and take the fight to the Decepticons. But they have to be strategic. And here we get our first introduction to the Target Masters. You see, much in the same way that the Nebulans use their technology to combine some of them with the heads of some Autobots, other Nebulans have now been combined with the weapons of others. Meanwhile, Hot Rod, working on communications, has come across a transmission from some other Autobots on another planet. I assume you know where that is. We'll get back to that later. And it's here where we find our original Target Masters and their Autobot bodies locked away. And of course, Lord Zarak wants to wake Gallon up so he can gloat about his victory and also tell Gallon about his punishment for what he calls treason. And that's when they get a notification that the Autobots are at this place called the Nursery. And of course, if the Decepticons know the Autobots are at the Nursery, the Decepticons are going to the Nursery. But that's not the only surprise on this day. The Decepticons are in for a surprise too, as these new Target Masters give our remaining Autobots extra firepower. And you know who doesn't mind extra firepower? Cup. But as the fight intensifies, the Autobots know that the real losers of this battle are the Nebulan civilians that are in the crossfire of this fight between the Decepticons and Autobots. And the only way to ensure their safety is to leave the fight, and that's what they do. But here's where we get a turn. Lord Zarak is now seeing what his ambition is doing to the planet of Nebulus, and he does a full 180, knowing now that Gallon was right. So he frees the Autobot Headmasters in order to fight back against the Decepticons. And once again, we get a full firefight between the Autobots and Decepticons. And again, the real victims are Nebulan people and property. But even with the best intentions, Zarak's connection to Scorponok leads him back to the fight. And Fortress Maximus decides that there's only one way to truly end this fight on Nebulus. After they win that battle, they decide that it's time to leave Nebulus because that's the only way that the fighting will stop on this planet. So the Autobots prepare to leave and go to this other planet where Autobots are taking refuge, this planet called Earth. So the Autobots take off to their ship they left floating in orbit when they first got to Nebulus, and the Decepticons are not far behind them. If nothing else, at least leaving Nebulus peaceful and able to rebuild.